Congressman Cohen, and everyone here to discuss the importance of investing in America's infrastructure. The scale of FedEx's network is truly incredible, including more than 570,000 dedicated team members and more than 680 aircraft. We serve more than 650 airports in the U.S. and abroad, and on the ground we operate 200,000 motorized vehicles. And across all FedEx operating companies, we cover more than 2.5 billion highway miles per year, can reach every zip code. We know that investments in a modern, sustainable, and more efficient national transportation system will create American jobs, and it will ensure the security of critical and consumer supply chains and support domestic economic recovery and growth. The U.S. must focus on creating sound and efficient trucking policies while also investing in infrastructure. As seen during the COVID-19 pandemic, the U.S. trucking industry is a critical link in maintaining supply chains, accommodating rapid growth in e-commerce, and meeting fast-changing consumer demands. We are encouraged by the bipartisan momentum on this important issue and hope that legislation will include incentivizing commercial electric vehicles, promoting the building of zero-emission vehicle charging infrastructure, and advancing research in low-emission and alternative aviation fuels. We must modernize the electric grid to accommodate more renewable energy and prepare the grid for the large-scale deployment of electric vehicles. On the aviation front, if we want to see the full benefit of sustainable aviation fuels, we need to invest in a manner that will facilitate development and create a sufficient supply of SAFs that can meet and adjust to operator demand. We also need to prioritize modernizing our air traffic control system. Beyond technology updates and staffing, we need to focus on updating air traffic management policies and guidance in a way that balances sustainability and efficiency objectives with community impact. Our network requires safe and modern infrastructure to operate efficiently for our customers throughout this country. To help advance technology and to maximize competitiveness, our federal and state governments must work towards modernizing our infrastructure and our transportation regulations. Thank you again, Secretary Buttigieg and the team, for allowing us to hold today's roundtable here at FedEx, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for hosting us. Thank you for your leadership, and very much looking forward to this discussion. Senator Blackburn, Congressman Cohen, and each of our panelists, thank you so much for your attention at a very important moment. I'll just before turning it over to Stephanie Pollack to guide our discussion, I'll offer a few thoughts. And first of all, don't want to miss the moment to just acknowledge that the FedEx family, I know, is still hurting from what happened in Indianapolis. As I said to Fred Smith at the time, the whole country feels that and knows that you've been looking after one another after
Thank you, Secretary.
Terrible tragedy. It's not something we can accept. And we think about safety in one context as we keep Americans safe from violence, but another context as we keep Americans safe on the roads, which is why we're here now. And this is the highest priority of our government in every sense, and certainly the highest priority of the Department of Transportation. In fact, I believe it's why the Department of Transportation exists, is to keep Americans safe, in addition to all of the other wonderful things that we do. And of course, safety is at the heart of what's happened at the DeSoto Bridge. I know that protracted closure has been frustrating, it has been difficult, it has been challenging, and it has been costly. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to make sure to be here. To emphasize the fact that we often have a single piece of infrastructure in a single place that really influences the life of the entire country when it's not available or when its availability is diminished. I've been advised that even with the phase 1 repairs of the bridge completed, it can't safely reopen until all of the repairs are completed and inspected to make sure there are no remaining safety issues. But I've also been really impressed and encouraged by the cooperation that's gone on across every different kind of line, across intergovernmental lines as we've had House and Senate and state and local leaders as we're going to be engaging with throughout the day, across state lines as Arkansas and Tennessee have partnered to get this looked after, across party lines as we have pursued this without regard to politics, which is a reminder that such things are still possible, especially when it comes to infrastructure. I also just want to emphasize our awareness as a department and as an administration that the greater Memphis metro area is critical to the national supply chain of the United States and the global supply chain. I'm going to remember, Senator, your 4 R's about roads, rail, river, and runways. That is a good way to remember the exquisitely multimodal nature of transportation infrastructure just around here. In fact, over 100,000 jobs involved in transportation and material moving occupations are here. And the DeSoto Bridge is an important part of that. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about how this closure has impacted everyone here at the table. And more broadly, take this as a moment to look at why infrastructure matters so much and why we have to make sure that we create certainty as well as safety, both for businesses and for families. And with that, let me turn it over to our acting administrator of the Federal Highway Administration, who you and your team, Stephanie, I know have been working incredibly hard and have been doing such good work really from the very beginning of this. So I'll turn it over to you to lead our discussion.
Thank you, Secretary, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning. And, you know, we're here this morning to learn more about both how the closure of the DeSoto Bridge is affecting Memphis as the national center of freight movement and logistics that it is, and also to talk about what that teaches us about the importance of infrastructure to our economy, not just to our transportation system. And I had the pleasure of coming down to Memphis just after the initial bridge closure, and I heard some of that, and I also heard a lot about the importance of carrying that message back to the Secretary, and that's why he wanted to join us for this morning. So we're going to start the roundtable as a roundtable. We're just going to start at that end of the table, and I'll introduce everyone and ask each of you to just start off with a couple of minutes on the most important message that you want to make sure that the U.S. DOT hears about Memphis and freight and logistics, and specifically about the bridge. And I'll start at this end with the senior senator from Tennessee, Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Administrator. We appreciate that. And Mr. Secretary, we are appreciative that you have taken your time today. And as you rightfully said, it is safety and dependability that is our focus today, whether we're talking about the roads, the rivers, the rail, or the runways. And when we talk with business that is located here in this 3-state area, this Mid-South region, what we realize is that coming across I-40 and that bridge, you have an interstate that spans from North Carolina, the East Coast, all the way to California on the West Coast. This is a major transit area. So for not only the logistics companies that are here in the Mid-South, but across the entire country, for barges that are backed up in the river to Illinois, what we need to have is a timeline and a framework of a timeline for a mitigation plan to be carried out, because it does affect each of those 4 components that are involved in the movement of much of the nation's produce, cattle, ag products, goods, and we want to make certain that we're fair to all of these different industrial components. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Next, I'd like to introduce Donna England. She's the Vice President for Safety and Member Services at the Tennessee Trucking Association. Was kind enough to begin my education at the Chamber a couple weeks ago, and we're delighted to have you this morning, Donna.
Thank you, Madam Administrator, Secretary. Thank you for inviting us out. This was, of course, one of those things that when you hear 911 is called and you have to shut down a whole bridge, a 6-lane bridge, you definitely know it's going to affect our industry. Our industry is trucking. We have over, as an association, we are the voice of trucking in Tennessee. We have over 500 member companies. As far as our members, FedEx is one of those members. I know FedEx is involved with all the state trucking associations throughout the country. We are hearing from our members that, you know, they're losing their drivers, the capacity that their drivers had. In our industry right now, we have a driver shortage. The American Trucking Associations stated that at the beginning of the pandemic, we had over 6,000 drivers that we were short in our industry. Having this bridge down is taking time away from our drivers, and so therefore it is hurting our driver shortage, I believe. So I feel like that not only is it costing our motor carriers more money if they have to go north 100 miles or south 80 miles to cross another bridge to get through from the west coast to the east coast, then they're adding cost. And when that cost is added, then who does that cost get passed down to? It gets passed down to our consumers as well as our shippers. So it's important that, one, we get that bridge back up and running as soon as possible. Safety is our #1 goal. We do want that bridge safe before it is opened up to any traffic at all. I think that the next step with the infrastructure is we have got to work on our infrastructure. Our infrastructure is aging. We know when you look at it how many bridges that we have out there, hundreds of them that are on the federal highways that are aging. They're old and they're going to need work. And if we can't put money towards them, are we going to have this happen again in more states? So it's important that we invest in our infrastructure. And then the other thing that I will mention is I think that this bridge closure is affecting more regional freight, like the FedExes, because they have to cross that bridge daily more times than one. When you've got your over-the-road truck drivers, they may have to cross it once or twice, 3 times a week. If you have a company these companies have multiple trucks that cross that bridge on a daily basis, then it could add up to a lot of hours that they're losing with their drivers, with us already having the driver shortage. Thank you again for having me.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for joining us. So next, I would like to recognize Congressman Cohn from Tennessee, who represents the district that's really at the center of being affected by the bridge.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction. I am from Tennessee, but I'm from Memphis. We're appreciative of your being in Memphis, Secretary. This is America's distribution center, largely because of Federal Express, but also, as Senator Blackburn well described, the 4 R's. And so every part of transportation is pertinent to Memphis and important. We're the 4th largest inland river port. We've got several, I think it's 4 major rail lines coming through and several highways. We've got 2 bridges. A lot of people like to have 3 bridges, maybe 4, but 3 would be fine. And we want to see that this problem doesn't occur again. What's happening in Memphis right now is a microcosm of what's happening in the country. Old bridges that are in need of repair, that are in need of inspection for safety purposes. We fortunately did not have a tragedy here and loss of life, but it easily could have happened. It'll happen somewhere else, like it happened in St. Paul or Minneapolis a few years ago, and it's happened in other places. So the bill is so important that we pass it. You know, it's ever since I've been in Congress, which is now 15 years, there's been an interest in infrastructure. It's not been accomplished because of the funding mechanisms, but the funding mechanisms, we need to come up with one and make it happen, because the American people can't wait any longer, because as FedEx knows, it creates jobs. And we're ready to move, and I'm with you, and thank you for being here, and yield back the balance of my time.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Congressman. Next, we have Shannon Newton, who's the president of the Arkansas Trucking Association. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me, Madam Administrator, and it's nice to see you, Secretary. I appreciate the comments that you made in opening and recognizing the significance of this bridge closure, not only to the region, but to the national economy. I represent the Arkansas Trucking Association. Our organization has over 300 members, primarily trucking companies based in Arkansas. Just for, I guess, a little bit of situational awareness, Arkansas is actually #1 in the country per capita in transportation and logistics employment. So it's a huge industry in our state. Geographically, we rely on the West Memphis Bridge to connect us to the eastern part of the U.S. for purposes of economy, both getting our goods out and transporting goods in. So it's disproportionately impacting the companies and the businesses in Arkansas that rely on surface transportation to facilitate commerce. And so I just want to make sure that you leave understanding the significance of that. There's certainly plenty of other issues that, as we talk about, a lot of the businesses in Northeast Arkansas have transitioned their shifts to try to avoid going over the bridge, but they've operated for decades servicing a region as though they could transfer from one to the other. And so this, essentially cutting off the two cities has caused significant stress on my members in that part of the state. With regard to the cost of the industry, I know we've kind of been on the forefront of pressing the cost that this bridge closure has caused to the industry, citing data provided by the American Transportation Research Institute. The cost of that congestion, if you look at it being roughly, I think the delay now is about an hour, and it is down from the initial 84 minutes that was cited, immediately when the bridge was abruptly closed. But right now, the drivers, 26,500 drivers a day, that's on the commercial side, have relied on that bridge. And so now you have those same 26,500 drivers facing a decision. Do they want to risk it and chance what the congestion and the traffic delays are at that time of day, or do they want to choose a different route? And either way, they're looking at 60 minutes of congestion or more than 60 miles out of route, which is roughly $2 million a day that the industry is absorbing in cost as long as that bridge is out. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for those excellent points. And then our last panelist is Jason Higginbottom, who is the CFO of Ozark Motor Lines, which is a family-run trucking business.
Yes, we are, and celebrating our 60th anniversary this month. So a very proud, locally owned company. We have roughly 900 employees, not all based here in Memphis, but the impact of the bridge closure is not simply a local or even regional issue as we talk about Arkansas. We operate in the eastern two-thirds of the United States, and we see the impact across the country. You have to make the decision hundreds of miles away before you ever reach Memphis to risk it, as Shannon says, or to go around. Infrastructure is our workplace. It's where we are every day on the highways and roads of America. And I'm proud of the state of Tennessee for recognizing the need to invest in infrastructure and passing the IMPROVE Act several years ago to provide additional state funding for roads and bridges here locally. But only sustainable federal funding will long-term ensure we have the best, most competitive infrastructure in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe we'll continue the roundtable. Could you talk a little bit about, to help the Secretary and I understand what you're actually doing with your company, how the bridge closure is affecting how you're operating, what your costs are, whether it's exacerbating the driver shortage?
It's certainly exacerbating the driver shortage just due to the loss of productivity. It's also made strangely hiring drivers from west of the Mississippi harder for us because they don't want to come across the bridge and deal with it. They'd rather take a job that takes them somewhere else. Here locally, we've had to adjust work schedules. Like many employers in Memphis, we have employees living throughout the Mid-South region, including in Arkansas. And we have people whose commute has gone from half an hour to 90 minutes. And we've had to adjust shifts. Fortunately, due to COVID, we're much more adept at remote work now. But it has had an impact top to bottom, from receiving supplier shipments of things that we need, employees being able to get to work, just broadly across the board.
Thank you. That's really helpful to understand. Going back to Shannon, so I think the point that you made about this trade-off, which is 60 minutes extra or 60 miles, is a really important point. Can you talk a little bit about how your members sort of sort that out and what the effects are if you choose to go the longer detour versus if you choose to sit in the congestion?
Sure, thank you. I want to first add on to what Jason said, or just maybe reiterate that.
Yep.
Our members located in the region are also having to shift what used to be a 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. shift is now a 2 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift, because that's when they can cross the bridge more than once most efficiently, which obviously has a negative impact on their drivers' quality of life. Working from 2 in the afternoon to 2 in the morning is not necessarily ideal if you were accustomed to working 6 to 6. In addition, those companies are experiencing that driver shortage, and if you thought it was previously difficult to attract a driver to service that route, it is now increasingly difficult to attract an employee to commit to transporting goods back and forth across the bridge. With regard to choosing, the congestion versus the rerouting, I think ultimately, we've identified I-55 as the priority for rerouting, but there are 2 other bridges that we've been monitoring closely as far as traffic count and how traffic has been diverted. The I-49 bridge, which is in South Arkansas, and the 155 bridge, which is in Southwest Missouri, have both experienced increased traffic, not to the extent that it's causing congestion delays. I think Donna cited her numbers may be a little bit more specific than mine, that the south route is 80 miles out of route and the north route is 100 miles out of route. That's assuming that you stay on 40 up until you take that delay. There are in other cases where, you may be choosing to take 10 or 70, completely avoiding the area altogether, and we're still trying to quantify exactly the impact of that type of rerouting, because that has a trickle effect of, IFTA miles and highway funding. And if companies are avoiding going through this region entirely, not only are you missing out on the commerce that would have been here, but there are long-term impacts for commercial miles. And as you know, the way that the highways are funded are based on how many commercial miles, from our industry anyway, are reported in those states. And so if there is a substantial, whether it's 15 or 20%, even that small amount, if this is lasting a quarter, 6 months, 9 months, the longer it goes on, the greater impact that is on the state financially, but also on the industry. As far as making the determination, I think, some companies like FedEx have sophisticated technology, and so they're able to help their drivers and to help them make the best decision based on where their delivery point is and what time of day they're going to be coming through this part of the country. Though trucking is a huge industry, it is predominantly made up of small businesses. And those small businesses don't have those technologies readily available to make those types of sophisticated decisions. And so they're often deferring to their drivers to determine, based on their own hours of service availability and their own preferences, would they choose to, risk it and see what the congestion is like at the time of day that they have to come through here, or are they more comfortable taking an alternate route? Some cases, those routes may not be designed for commercial traffic. Some of the state highways and county roads are not intended to carry commercial traffic, east-west corridor throughout the U.S. And so there are other implications that come along with that decision. And the industry is, we are going to continue, whether it be a global pandemic or an infrastructure crisis, we're going to continue to deliver freight. We're going to find a way to get the goods from where they are to where they need to be. But that process right now is a little bit messy due to the closure of the I-40 bridge.
I think we can agree the pandemic would have been more than enough for your members to have to deal with before facing this, so we appreciate that determination.
So I'd like to come back to Donna to follow up on Shannon's points. I have this vision in my head of this huge industry that consists of these small businesses, and one of the things that sometimes the federal government can bring to the table, certainly working with our state partners, is better information, better real-time information. Obviously the bridge is going to stay closed until it's safe for the bridge to open, and unfortunately we're not in a position to say today exactly when that is going to be. We're going to be taking a look at the bridge later and meeting with the Tennessee and Arkansas DOT folks to sort of learn about that. But presumably we've still got a while in this situation. So is there more we can be doing during the closure? Well, I'll talk about after the closure in a moment, but during this closure period, whether we as cities or states or the federal government, to help the industry sort of weather this storm?
You know, TDOT has been instrumental in getting the word out. We have so many partners that we partner with in our association, and I'm sure Shannon does as well, that we are able to get the word out to our members. We can't touch all the truckers out there, so if there's any way that you guys could reach out and touch truckers, that would definitely be a help. I know that it's all over the news, the media, you know, shares all the information that they can about the closure and what we can do to streamline it and make it, you know, ease the pain a little bit. I don't know that there's really anything else that can be done to ease that pain.
Yeah.
I do know that, you know, the drivers, you know, a lot of the drivers will leave early, like Shannon said. Their driver dispatchers are saying, hey, you need to leave 2 hours earlier to make sure you get across that bridge before rush hour traffic. You need to make sure you're coming back across before the rush hour traffic in the afternoons. So I know that that alleviates a little bit of the traffic and the congestion. And then if you ask people about crossing that bridge, how long it takes them, a lot of them will say that they sit in traffic, and some will say that they just, you know, come right across and, you know, slow go, depending on the time of day. So maybe that would be something if we had, I'm not sure if RDOT is doing anything about signs leading up to how long it's going to take you to cross the bridge. The drivers could possibly stop prior to and take a break before they try to cross the bridge if they had warnings prior to crossing, and that's coming from TDOT as well, from Tennessee going into Arkansas. So that could be something that might help. I think, I'm not sure, but they may be doing that, some signage, but more signage and notifications that, hey, this is the wait time on the bridge. I know that TDOT has traffic cameras, and you can actually go to that traffic camera and you can see the traffic flow across that bridge. And if we could get that information out to the truckers to say, hey, check the TDOT traffic cams before you attempt to cross the bridge. That way you know whether or not it's going to be bumper to bumper stop traffic or it's flowing pretty steady when you get there.
Those are all really great ideas, and we will work with TDOT and with RDOT to see if there's more we can do. And when you say get it out to the drivers, I think one of the things that I'm hearing is this is regional and even national, and so it's not just enough for your association or your association, maybe Federal Motor Carriers, you know, which has information about all truckers, could try to help on more of a national scale to make sure that nobody's driving into this region and not knowing what's going on. So that's a great suggestion. I'm going to ask the same question of both Jason and of Shannon, which is, given that, you know, we're going to be in this situation for a while longer, are there things that aren't happening quite yet that we could be doing, because we obviously want to be a helpful resource?
From a purely regional perspective, the hours of service constraints based around the bridge delays are certainly something to be looked at with FMCSA. I know that at the moment we have difficulties at times securing timely diesel deliveries just due to the dwell times of trucks crossing the bridge. And I know FMCSA is always safety conscious and therefore is hesitant for waivers and exemptions, and they always want as targeted as possible. But there are a lot of local businesses struggling for, because we're a regional economy, the local food warehouse is here servicing small restaurants in eastern Arkansas. Anything that's narrowly focused and tailored for a air mile radius around Memphis that encompasses the affected area might be a very bright line way to aid the local regional economy from the disruption.
I want to, I guess, thank TDOT and RDOT both for their attention. I think the capacity constraints immediately around the I-55 bridge and the way that they have attempted to repurpose some shoulders and create, you know, 2-lane roads where there used to be a 1-lane ramp. I think that's been helpful on the Tennessee side. Arkansas is looking at it, but has yet to really come up with any additional capacity solutions. If there are any federal either waivers or funds are available in order to just increase capacity as that north and south corridor and the east and west corridor all converging to use one bridge, that's something that I think is helpful if there is a way to do that safely. And something that hasn't been mentioned that we found was a significant problem in Arkansas. Truck parking is always a problem. But when you insert this type of situation in an area like West Memphis that is known by the trucking community as it is a very popular place to rest, and it is now no longer a very convenient place to rest. And so I'm grateful that RDOT has actually done everything within their power to open rest areas, way stations to truck parking whenever they're not being utilized for another purpose. We even had a way station that was closed because it was undergoing some service, and we would rather them be able to park in a rest area that doesn't have services than along the shoulders and ramps of the interstate. And so they've been very helpful in making that possible, but I think that is, I noticed, I drove over last night and the available truck parking was all used, and the trucks were still parking, on the ramps, trying to get as close as possible to the rest areas. So that's an issue that is always an issue for the industry, but when you overlay a challenge like this, it's exacerbated within the area. The delays, the inconvenience of being in the air, all of that makes the need to stop somewhere close safely more challenging.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Clearly, truck parking is a big problem, and all of us would like to help there be more parking where there are services. We're also looking to a future where we want to make sure that truck parking comes with the ability to charge commercial vehicles, which is something that our host from FedEx brought up. But you're right, in the short term, in the teeth of this crisis, places to park without services. So we can absolutely continue to work with Tennessee DOT and RDOT to see if there are other locations that are safer than on-ramps on the side of the interstate, even if they don't come with the services.
Thank you.
So that's a great point. Thank you very much. So we've been talking a lot about the sort of the immediate disruption caused by the closure of the bridge, but I do want to get back, starting with the Senator, to the point of, you started us off with a very important point, which is the system that we are all investing in needs to be safe. It also needs to be reliable. Obviously, the bridge closure is adversely impacting the reliability of the system. What are some of the lessons you think we should learn from this closure that we should apply going forward as we think about the repair of our infrastructure?
One of the things that we have to realize, and this is something that Congressman Cohen and I, as elected officials and those at the state and the local level, if you build something, you have to maintain it. And making certain that those maintenance dollars are a part of all of the funding mechanisms, that there is the expectation that you're going to need to conduct these repairs. The other thing that I think we have to look at as we move forward is making certain that there is that agency, cross-agency coordination when something of this nature happens, because we immediately needed to work with the Coast Guard, then the Corps for dredging needed to be brought in. There's communication with the rail lines that has to happen. There's communication with the airport that needs to happen, and the federal government has an important role to play in that. And it's important that the federal government respond promptly, because if there is a lack of response, then that is going to just stop everything. And I think that with TDOT, Commissioner Bright and his team have done an outstanding job of saying, here we are at the federal level and working with USDOT and working with Shelby County and the RDOT and the regional partners to say, here is a way forward. Another thing that is a discussion that we would pivot to on another day at a different time is the discussion of materials. that are used. And there will be lessons learned from looking at the type bridges that we build, the type materials that we use, the longevity of our infrastructure, and the expectations, because the public does expect, the taxpayers expect that this is going to be safe, it is going to be dependable.
Well said.
Yeah, no, this is a really important point, Senator. There is some irony that has been noted that we have closed the relatively younger bridge that was built as part of the interstate program and diverted traffic to the older bridge that predates the existence of the interstate program and was built in the 1940s. And, you know, obviously RDOT and Tennessee triple check to make sure that that bridge is safe and can carry that additional capacity, and it can, but it's almost 25 years older, and it's better, so we need to learn the way to build those bridges. So thank you. Congressman, I want to give you the opportunity to answer the same question, which are what are some of the lessons you think that we should sort of learn from this incident and apply going forward as we think about our infrastructure?
Well, thank you. With appreciation for Secretary Pete's rapid rise and at his young age, sometimes older is better. And I appreciate your mentioning that, Marsha. I was born in 1949, the same year the bridge was opened. Great year. The federal government was here, and the federal government responded. And I thank y'all for that. It was so important when the administrator came, and the secretary's here now. And the public wanted to have reassurances that this was not a situation that the federal government wasn't aware of and doing all that it could to help. And I thank you for that. I know the senator thanks you for that, and it's been important. Memphis is a distribution center, and we've got 5 Class 1 railroads. I think I shortchanged one on my opening remarks. But we are a center, and so this is so important that you have a knowledge of our city and what we are to America. It's a special place, and Federal Express is a whole lot of it. But we've also, really the reason the city exists is because of the river, which was transportation back then, and the river was the runways of the 1819 era when Memphis was founded. So we've got to have maybe some redundancies in our checks on maintenance, and Arkansas responded quickly, and I appreciate what the Secretary, what's your title, Secretary or Commissioner?
I'm not
Director.
with RDOT.
Is it Director?
President's my title, but I'm not with RDOT.
Or you're not? Well, President. It's nice to be with another president. But Arkansas responded, and we need to have redundancies, I think, in our maintenance. And I think that's something we should learn.
Thank you, indeed.
Yeah, I think the resiliency, redundancy issue is a really important issue. So, you know, Jason, you made the point in your initial comments about the need for a sustainable federal funding source, which obviously is something that the Secretary and I would strongly agree with. Are there other lessons that we should learn so that after we get past this incident, we are doing a better job delivering the infrastructure that, as you said, is the workplace for your employees?
I think just as long as there's sustainable funding so that the state transportation agencies can have their own long-term plan, then I think you see the diversification of multimodal transportation. You see alternative fuel sources developed naturally and organically, electric vehicle charging networks, infrastructure, information infrastructure. I mean, the federal ability to communicate and centralize information to the discussion Shannon was having about making the detour and what can the DOT do. Everybody uses a Google Maps or an app of their choice. Instead of 50 different state DOTs needing to try and interface with that person, the federal DOT is the natural clearinghouse for that. So closer partnership with the state DOTs to serve as a facilitator to outside parties would certainly be a looking forward lesson, not only for when a crisis like this occurs, but just natural congestion events. It's the summer driving vacation season. It's probably a very good way for the feds to assist.
It's a great suggestion. Shannon, any thoughts on lessons learned before we wrap up?
I just think maybe a realistic expectations. I think acknowledging that the interstate system was built 50 years ago or more in some cases, and kind of setting our expectations that we should be expecting things to wear and tear. We should be expecting to reinvest in order to maintain that huge investment that we made so many decades ago. And so I think it just from everyone's just kind of a reset of expectation that the infrastructure that we depend upon is aging. And we are going to have to invest more in order to rely on it and use it in a way that we want to in today's economy. And so I think that's just going forward, just trying to kind of have everyone reading from the same playbook that we are going to have to spend more in order to preserve the system. Our industry has long supported a fuel tax increase as the most fair and equitable way to do that, and we stand ready to continue to support that and to invest in additional infrastructure.
Thank you. Secretary, we're just about out of time, but I wanted to give you a couple moments to wrap us up.
Great, a few thoughts. Actually, before I go, Raj, any reflections you'd want to share?
Well, I was just going to say, the three big sentiments that reflected here I fully endorse. First is the safety does come first, and dependability, safety always comes first at FedEx. And this notion, the coinage of 4 Rs, I love that, and that's where Memphis is, and and it is definitely not a local issue. This is a regional and a national issue. And 70% of all freight tonnage in the U.S. moves on trucks, and we expect by 2045 that volume will increase by 45%. To the point we just talked about, this is a critical issue. Otherwise, this traffic will come to a crawl. So I appreciate you being here and hearing this issue, but I think those are the main points I would take away.
Well, thank you, and I want to thank everybody here for the insights. I'll be carrying these with me both during the day as we have a look at the bridge itself, and then as we go forward on a policy basis. The biggest things I'm taking away, first of all, of course, are simply the importance of this infrastructure and the very real quantifiable costs, as well as the maybe less quantifiable costs in terms of the disruption to the lives and the routines and the workplace, as you eloquently put it, that so many people count on. Another is the cost of allowing things to continue the way they've been, to accept infrastructure being degraded in a country that I think we all agree seeks to maintain its leading position as the leading economy and the leading nation of the world, which is why it's so important for us to be looking after what we have and investing in what we might need for the future. And the other thing that I think is resonating through all the conversation here is the importance of partnerships. Whether we're talking about different private sector bodies engaging with public sector bodies, whether we're talking about working across state lines, or even across our own org charts within, for example, the federal executive branch. I think it's a great point that we could talk to Motor Carrier about a few things that they might be able to help with on information or some other fronts. So I appreciate very much the insights here, and as we continue to seek to support the states in resolving this as quickly as they safely and responsibly can, we're going to be here with you every step of the way and look forward to remaining in touch as we go. So thank you again, and thanks, Stephanie, for leading the discussion.
Yes, and thanks to all of our panelists, particularly the senator and the congressman. I know you have busy days when you finally get back to the district, and in the spirit of recognizing partnerships, we very much want to thank both the Tennessee Department of Transportation, Arkansas Department of Transportation, and of course our Federal Highway Division offices here in Tennessee and in Arkansas. People have been working 25, 30-hour days since the bridge closed 3 weeks ago, and we will continue that work and that partnerships until we can safely reopen the bridge. So thank you all, and we will definitely carry what we heard today back with us.